Well, I think we need to understand this concept of the Xinjiang diasporic community. So there's around 1 million people with links from Xinjiang that live overseas now. About 80% of them are Uyghurs, but there is a small minority of Han Chinese who are chiefly linked with the Xinjiang Production and Construction Corp, otherwise known as the Bingtuan. And the Bingtuan was set up in 1954 by Chairman Mao as the kind of chief colonizing vehicle of the region. It brought millions of Han Chinese into Xinjiang, really transforming its demography, shifting it from about 5% Han around the time of the Chinese Revolution to 42% today. And when the the Han Chinese members of the Bingtuan go overseas, they can export that colonial process overseas by claiming to speak on behalf of Xinjiang. And when they echo CCP narratives about a kind of harmonious, peaceful, multi-ethnic community, really what they're doing is denying the legitimate concerns the Uyghurs have about what's happening in their homeland.
So how is that happening? According to your research, how is the CCP infiltrating Uyghur communities overseas? Can you give us some specific examples?
Yeah, well, it really starts with information work through surveillance. For over several decades, the party has been gathering really detailed information on both Uyghurs and Han living overseas, as well as their relatives back in China. It's been mobilizing, particularly more recently, community groups that tend to be Han dominated, but do have Uyghurs as well, who are willing to align with the party and its views, and then mobilizing them, and in some cases, co-opting them to pursue the party's agenda overseas.
James, how do you know that these aren't just good faith groups representing a part of the community from Xinjiang?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good and really important question. What we've done in the report is try to look for red flags of individuals as well as community organizations that have verifiable links back to the Chinese Communist Party and its vast and decentralized United Front system. So the starting point really is to look at relationships between these groups and the Chinese diplomatic mission overseas, but then to look at its key leaders and see to what extent they have been members of key United Front organs, to what extent they've traveled back to China, and also to look very closely at their messaging as it relates to Xinjiang, and to what extent they are used as propaganda vehicles and commonly quoted in the Chinese language media in support of the policies of the Chinese Communist Party.
For governments that seek to assert their influence abroad, why is what the CCP is doing any different to what other countries such as Australia are doing?
Yeah, all countries try to advance their national interests overseas. I think in the case of the Chinese Communist Party, there's a couple of distinguishing features that should be of concern to us. First is the sheer size and scale of it. Under Xi Jinping, we've really seen a kind of doubling down on overseas information and influence work. The PRC now has more diplomatic missions overseas than any other country. But perhaps the most concerning is the way in which it often operates in the shadows, behind closed doors, and the way it can corrupt democratic institutions and values, and potentially undermine sovereignty of free countries, and interfere with the daily lives of individuals who are seeking to flee the repression back in the PRC.
You believe Australia is in a relatively good position to identify such operations, but not so for several other countries.
Yeah, well, I think we've come a long way since 2017. At the same time, I don't think we can be complacent. These United Front groups and links are still active. They're still in place waiting for an opportunity. But yes, thanks to our really robust media, as well as our think tanks and academic institutions, we really have pioneered understanding about the United Front apparatuses globally, where many other countries that don't have those democratic institutions, say Kazakhstan or Turkey, what we've seen is that the party is really been able to get some serious international traction with regards to its narrative on Xinjiang. And that's what it seeks to do. It seeks to sow misinformation, disinformation, to create kind of plausible deniability so that leaders of, say, Turkey or Kazakhstan can speak from the cue cards of the Chinese Communist Party when it comes to what's happening in Xinjiang and really deny or whitewash the serious human rights abuses that we know have occurred in the region, which many argue amount to crimes against humanity.
And James, what did you make of UN Human Rights Chief Michelle Bachelet's recent visit to Xinjiang and what she had to say about it?
Well, I think it's a great example of the concern here, the way the party has been able to put forward its narrative, its talking points. Ms. Bachelet, seriously important position as the UN Human Rights Commissioner, sought to go to China, wasn't given complete unfettered access to Xinjiang. But most disturbingly, in her final remarks, she just kind of uncritically echoed many of the comments of the Chinese Communist Party as it relates to counterterrorism and economic development. So we'll wait and see. There's supposed to be a report coming out of her office. We'll wait and see if that report is released and what it has to say. But I have to say her visit and her remarks were really quite concerning.
Professor James Leibold, thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thanks. Great to be with you.